Hi guys, Bomber here. Welcome back to the channel, and today we're gonna do a CCC. This week theme was Happy Valentine Day, so you had to design cards which had love in its theme or related to that. So before starting the reviews, I want to really thank a lot I'm Miniman, which is an user, a player of War of Omens on Discord. I met him here, and he also has a YouTube channel. So I leave in the description a link to go to his channel and share some love with him. And I really want to thank him because you may see that the CCC went up in quality, and you could let me know if that is the case in the comments. And the reason why the quality went up is mainly because of him. So really a huge thank you to Miniman. And with that said, let's jump into the reviews. So for the first place, we have Declare Heresy from Planck. It's a fate card from Vespitole. It costs 12 gold, and it reads, discard all non-war allies, and for each health point spent, summon a fanatic, and draw a card, like all Vespitole cards. So a fanatic is a card from war, but it's not a collectible card, it's a summoned ally, and it reads on turn, attack, and it intercepts, and it has 1 health point. So it's like a militia, but with not with the retaliate. Also, it has a flavor text, which reads, the feeble-minded can do foolish things for love, whether it is love for gold, love for others, or love for God. Cardinal Pocky. So definitely a really good flavor text, which really emphasizes the love for God, which in this case is not that much love, but either like fanatism. And in fact, I believe that the name of the card should really be Fanatism instead of Declare Heresy. But with that said, I gave this card 3 points out of 5 in design and 0 point out of 5 in balance. And the reason why for those choices, for a final rating of 6, by the way, and the reason why for those choices is because, first of all, there isn't, as I said, there is not that much love involved, because the love is forced, it's not real love. But anyway, it is indeed a type of love. Also, not that much love for God in itself, because you are actually loving the church, because you are doing what the Cardinal Pocky is saying and not what God is saying. Most of the times the fanatism is because you believe something that a man is saying to you rather than a God is saying to you. But anyway, I don't want to delve too much into the religious aspect of that, but in my opinion, there is not that much love involved. But anyway, the concept of the card is cool, so for that reason I went in a midway value, like 3 out of 5, because I do like the Mayhem effect in a Vespitole fashion, so that's cool. But again, the balance is 0 out of 5, because really this card is too OP. So you are getting this card, the cost is huge, but compare it, for example, to Miracle. Miracle, for example, could give you a Mayhem, but it's just a one-time effect, the Mayhem. And also, yeah, it could give you better cards, like, for example, the Warship or whatever. But with this, you are pretty much assured that your opponent can't play allies. If you are going against an ally deck, you basically won if you have this card. Because on top of the discard all non-war allies, which by the way is better than Mayhem, because Mayhem is discard all allies. Instead, if you are running war allies, you are discarding only your opponent's allies. So it's like a non-symmetrical effect, which is a pretty huge effect like Mayhem does. And also on top of that, so already even if the second line of the card weren't here, the card was already OP. But the second line of text is here, and so if you discard all your opponent's minions, actually allies, and they have obviously health points, you are also even more increasing your allies count by summoning the fanatics, which are basically some more militias, which just gives you much more attacks per turn and stuff. So really, this card, even at that high of a cost, is bonkers. It is a non-symmetrical effect, which is really strong, and also on top of that, it even pushes your advantage even more. So really, it's just an OP card, and for that reason, this is the first probably 0 balanced card ever. Then, at the 4th place, we have Jewelry from Superman. It's a Vespitole card from the Will tab. It costs 8 gold, and it reads plus 2 gold. Next turn, you lose 1 gold and you gain 1 magic, and draw a card like all Vespitole cards. It also has a flavor text, which is where are the merchants? We are the merchants of love. Here the lovers come to declare their passion. So definitely interesting flavor text. But anyway, I gave this card 2 points out of 5 in design and 3 points out of 5 in balance. And the reason why for those choices is because really this card is just a mix of collect taxes and prayer. Because it's true that first of all you gain the gold and then you gain the magic and lose that 1 gold, but really at the start of your next turn this card is really +1 gold and +1 magic, so it's like collect taxes and prayer. So the card is not that much original, but this is not too much of a consideration because we already have in Vespitole cards which are really better versions of the previous one at an higher cost. For example, prayer, devotion, or collect taxes and thief. So definitely that's not too much of an hinder for this card. But the cool things of this card in design is that it's not like +1 gold +1 magic, obviously, because that's not the card what the card does. At the start of your next turn, it will be like this, so +1 gold and +1 magic. But first of all, you gain the +2 gold, so it's like a thief, and then you lose that 1 gold and gain +1 magic, which is like a prayer and -1 gold. So it has some cool synergy. It almost acts a bit like a loan in the sense that you gain that gold advantage first and then you lose it. So you could actually use that gold in excess and then just go negative. So it may be used to increase your advantage more, and then okay, you go negative, but you have increased your advantage. So it's like you are speeding up your progress, your progression, and then you don't care about losing that progression because you know that on the long run you will eventually arise. And it's almost whatever Vespitole does. It starts low, but then it builds out of control. So that's a cool thing going on. Instead for the balance, I gave it 3 points out of 5 because really, if you want gold and economy, then thief is better, and if you want magic, then prayer or devotion is better. So I'm almost a bit concerned about those cards which does a bit of that and a bit of that, and they do both of them weaker than other cards which are specifically for that thing. If you look at Thief, if you want the economy, then it costs 1 less gold and it gives you double the gold if you want the economy. And if you want instead the magic, only that 1 magic, then you may as well go for the prayer, which costs 3 gold less. So really, I feel that those cards are really, the cards that do a bit of that and a bit of that are not that good, and this is why I gave it only 3 points out of 5 in balance. Then, at the 3rd place, we actually have a tie, and the first of them is Arrhythmia from Astralica, and it's a Goetia card from Endazu, obviously, and it costs 4 gold and has 3 charges out of 20, and it reads Feed Health to lose a charge and attack weakest and ignore intercept. So I gave this card 3 points out of 5 in design and 3 points out of 5 in balance, and the reason why for a final rating of 9, and the reason why for those choices is because, first of all, why in the first place an Arrhythmia deals damage. So I may be okay with the fact that you need to spend life to actually have an Arrhythmia, so it actually makes a bit of sense. But why then the Arrhythmia deals damage to your opponent? Actually, it may just do damage only to yourself, so I don't see that much of a point in an Arrhythmia. It's okay that it deals damage to you by actually needing you to feed health to that, but then why does it translate into attacks? So that's a bit of a design concern on the flavor aspect. And other than that, it's a really cool design. I may see it like, for example, a common card, which just introduces you to the fact of Goetia spending life to gaining some advantages, and this card is really simple. It does that thing really well, so it actually is a good design in the way that it is a simple design. But then for the balance, I gave it 3 points out of 5 because I think it's a bit too weak. So actually you are spending 4 gold and then you need to spend every time 3 health points to get 3 attacks at the full value of this card. And if you want to do that, then it's probably better the whispered barbs, the incantations, and possibly in Raktaban, that is really stronger. So first of all, I may see a decrease in the cost of arrhythmia, because the cost you need to pay in the first place, then you actually need to maintain this cost by spending health points to gain the effect in itself. So definitely the first cost that you need to spend may go down. For example, even to 2, possibly even 1 gold, because then actually your effect is you need to spend life to gain that effect. Probably 2 gold is much more balanced. Then other than that, I also am concerned about the fact that it has 3 out of 20 charges. Probably Goetia cards can't be charged up with other cards, like Blood Pact. So for example, I may see it also go to 3 out of 3, because there is no point in having it up to 20, because it probably even can't be charged up. And then for the effect, is really okay. You are spending life to deal damage, so 1 for 1 is almost okay. You can use it obviously to kill glass cannons behind walls, and you can even use it to kill your opponent, and it's not that much toxic, because you can only do that 3 times per arrhythmia. So if this card, for example, were 20 out of 20, then you just needed to have 1 more health point than your opponent, and you can just kill him, because you don't care about losing your life and going up to 1 if your opponent is dead. But it's only 3, so you just these scenarios only happens if you are at 4 health points and your opponent is at 4 or more, and your opponent is at 3 health points. So I am okay with it being a finisher if your opponent is already pretty much dead. So that's not too much of a concern. So the 3 is balanced, but I think that it is still too weak for the reason I said before. Then for the second, third place, we have Service from Superman. It's a Madris card with tab unspecified, but that's okay. It costs 3 gold, and it reads next turn, enemy allies can't activate, destroy after use. And it also has a flavor text, which reads, my love for wine is without limits, and it is from an unknown source, like the tab. But with that said, I gave this card 3 points out of 5 in design, and 3 points out of 5 in balance, for a final rating of 9 out of 15. And the reason why for those choices is because for the design, actually the concept of the card is cool. I like the fact that you have some like stun effects, which they obviously come from the wine and the fact that you are stunned a bit after you are drunk. So that's really cool and a cool idea. But the theme for this week was to design love cards. And really, it's okay that the love is in the flavor text, but the wine itself is not that much related to love, in the way that why you are probably not giving your opponents wine because you love them. This unknown source may love the wine itself, but the effect of the card is getting your opponents drunk and giving them wine. So you are not actually loving them by doing that. You may love wine, but the service in itself is not a show of love in this sense. So really, it is not that much. It does not much fit in the theme of this week. But other than that, I wanted to actually award the fact that this card really is a very interesting idea. Then talking about the balance, another time I gave it these 3 points out of 5. Because it is strong in the sense that it acts a bit like a Mayhem for just 1 turn, but it is non-symmetrical. So you are actually only injuring your opponents, while if you are an ally-based deck, your allies can still be on the board and attack, unlikely with the Mayhem. You are actually discarding your opponents and also losing yourselves. Instead, with this, you keep your opponent's allies in play, but you are also keeping yourself in play. But their allies can't activate while yours can. And also, I think that this card works like for the next turn they can't activate at all. So for example, if you have on-feed allies, they will not activate if you feed them. And actually, you probably can't feed them in the first place for that turn while the service is activated. But this does not work for cards which do activate on feed if you play them from your hand. So probably this card still has its weakness, because some allies can still activate if, for example, they are bought or are drawn. But probably you could still say that all allies, not only the one on the board, those are two interpretation for this effect. I do believe this card will work like I said before, so only allies on the board when you cast the service can't activate, because if it is the other way around, it's probably really hard to code it anyway, but that could definitely be solved. So I still think that this is the first thing I say, but I may be wrong. But with that said, I gave this 3 points because it is situational. You need to have both you and your opponent a good board, and probably the service is only good when you are a bit ahead on the board and you actually want to recover, actually to make your opponent lose his board with your own allies. There is no point in playing it if you are just ahead, obviously, like almost all the cards, if you are already ahead. If your opponent, for example, doesn't have a board, and if instead you are behind, the service doesn't do you well, because if you don't have actually a board for yourself, then the service is pretty much useless. It may buy you another turn to do whatever stuff, but then if you just want to play the service to buy another turn, then obviously stratagem is better. So really, this card doesn't have some strong scenarios, and when it is wrong, it is situational. And in most of the case, it's weaker than Mayhem. And if you want to use it as a tempo gain, like for example another turn, then stratagem is better. So really, this card is weak in the sense that there are better cards to do what this card could do. And then for the third place, we actually have 3 cards tied in for the third place. Starting off with Bambino from I'm Miniman. Another time thanks to Eminem, but this won't save you from my harsh judgment. So the card is Bambino. It is from the Fate tab from Vespidole. It costs 0 gold and it reads draw a card, on feed +1 charge, and at 3 charges morph into a supplicant. It also has a flavor text, which reads, baby are weaklings, but don't be a barbaric and sacrifice them. If you nurture them enough, they can become strong and healthy like me. Another time, Cardinal Pocky. It is pretty famous for a good flavor text. I gave this card 4 points out of 5 in design and 3 points out of 5 in balance for a final rating of 11 out of 15. And the reason why for those choices is because definitely for the design, it is a really cool idea. We actually haven't seen some cards which actually transforms into others, and this card will be the first if it ever is released. And probably the only thing that I am a bit against is that it's cool that on feed, but I will probably let it only just feed with magic, to even more justify the fact that to give more the idea of the magic of love, that you need to nurture your bambino, which actually is a child in Italian, so actually a reference to my language. And so you actually need to feed your child okay with food itself, but actually with love in the first place. And love may be more actually represented with magic. So, and this is just a thing of design, by the way. So for that reason, I would only let it feed with magic. And probably then for balance, if this design flow is adjusted, it can be also balanced out, like for example only 2 charges needed to actually transform the bambino, the child, into a supplicant if it is on feed only with magic. But that's a design aspect. Instead, for the balance, I gave it 3 points out of 5 because I think it is a bit too weak. It's true that you are getting a supplicant for 0 gold, and instead you need to feed it with 3 apples, which is or magic, which is much more easier to do. But really, I don't feel like because when you buy the supplicant, if you want to go for the supplicant in the first place, the thing you are trying to do is build up a board, and probably on the first turns. Or supplicant can be used as a way to convert food into magic if you are not in an ally-based deck, for example for an olive rat, because usually the cards which gives you food, like for example the trade route and the Spice Road, sorry, and the Merchant Guild, no, the Trade Company, yeah, that's it. They cost 1 less gold to buy instead of the counterparts for magic, so the prayer and the devotion. And so you may go for those spells and then have a supplicant to actually then convert that food into magic, but you buy more spells which cost less to gain the food and then convert them into magic. So those are the uses which supplicant is used for, as an ally presence on the board or as a way to convert the food into magic. So if you want to go for the food into magic, then probably Bambino is better than a Supplicant itself. But if you want to go for an ally presence in the board, then Supplicant is still better, in my opinion, even if the Bambino is a discounted Supplicant. And that's because if you play the Supplicant, then your opponent has it just needs to answer it in the next turn. Instead, if you go for the Bambino, and probably you don't have already the food or the stuff to do that. Like, for example, you buy the Bambino, and probably on the first turn, I'm talking about that. You buy the Bambino, but then you don't have the thing to feed it. And then probably in that scenario, it's better the Supplicant. Because if you go for the Bambino instead, it doesn't do anything until you transform it. And so your opponent can actually plan ahead and kill it on the next turns. But by the way, still, and probably another flaw with the balance that I will change is a 0-cost card in Vespitole is a bit troublesome, because it actually doesn't cost you 0 gold, but actually gives you 1 more gold, because you draw a card. And it's true that this draw a card can be another draw a card from Vespitole, but eventually you will draw a coin, and that coin can be used to gain 1 more gold. So actually this card, skipping all the fact that it turns into a supplicant and whatever the unfeedable, this card could be used just as a way to gain +1 gold for free. And I may see this card used in a suffer option, for example, because already suffer option runs a serf, and probably not because he wants to shield himself or whatever, or his allies, because he doesn't run allies. It only runs a serf because it's just a 2-cost card, which throws you a card, which eventually will be a coin, as I said. So it actually only costs you 1 gold. And it's a net gain for... there are times when you don't want your last card in the bank to restock out of the bank. And so you go for the serf, and actually in that turn you went 2 more gold ahead for the next turn, while you can possibly on the next turn gain the card that you couldn't in the previous turn. For example, a corruption or whatever. So serf is already run in those decks for that reason. And Bambino is obviously better for that purpose, because you are actually spending 0 gold to gain 1 gold. So you are not spending 1, you are just gaining 1. So it's a 2 more net gold gain, which is obviously not what this card is intended for. So probably to avoid that, I would at least go for a 1 gold cost for Vespitole, which for Vespitole, since it has a draw a card, then it is really a 0-cost card, because it costs you 1, but then you gain 1. And so for that reason, this is also a balance issue that may let this card be too strong, but skipping all the card, what the actual card does in the first place, but just the fact that it is a 0-cost card in Vespitole, skipping all the effects and stuff. So it is a little OP in that sense, because it will be a stronger card in the place of an already strong card. Actually, not a strong card, but a card which is used in a strong deck. This card will be better than that card in that deck. But other than that, if this card is used as normal, then this card is a bit too weak, in my opinion. So in both cases, it has some problems with balance. And I may fix it with the 1 gold cost, and probably, as I say, the on-feed only with magic and 2 charges instead of 3 to solve both the design and the balance. And then, for the third place, we have Populous Cairn from Rat Elemental, which is an idol from the Daramek faction. It costs 3 golds, and it has 0 out of 4 charges, and it reads play an ally, get +1 charge, and at 4 charges you restock a slave. It also has a flavor text, which reads, a landmark to signify a gathering place. Soon the masses will arrive, by foot or by birth. So, definitely a pretty interesting flavor text, and I gave this card 3 points out of 5 in design, and 5 points out of 5 in balance, for a final rating of 11 out of 15. And the reason why for those choices is because for the design, I do get the sense of love by playing slaves to then at 4 charges when you have played the 4 slaves. For example, in play an ally, it could be a slave. So if you play 4 slaves, for example, you restock a slave, and as the flavor text suggests, it is by birth. Instead, by foot, it means that if you play, for example, the Earths, then this gathering place is like appealing for masses because it has food, and so the masses will arrive by foot or by birth. I do get the sense of love with by birth. Because obviously you are the people are mating to actually give birth to other slaves to actually play afterwards. And also it is cool that the gathering place could also be a place for food, and so that will appeal to the masses and that will arrive by foot. But this second meaning is not that much correlated to love, and so for that reason I gave it 3 points out of 5. Also, this card, this idol, is a bit similar to Erding Sons, and probably a bit weaker than that, because after that you have to also replay, actually buy the slave that you get. It is true that probably slaves are a bit better than some Earths that the Erding Son could give you, but probably not compared to the Erd of Aurochs. But anyway, it has some cool stuff, but it is really similar to the Erding Stones, and the only change is that it is restocks the card instead of summoning it. But really, probably the most appropriate thing that gave this card 3 points out of 5 in design is the fact of this by food. So actually, the food and not the love that gives birth and actually makes you restock another slave. And also there is this fact about it being really similar to another card already existing. But it's not the main thing that the Indred is value on the design. Instead, for balance, I think this card is really balanced, because if used in a normal way, it is just a cool way to have even more slaves to play. For example, in an aggressive slave deck. It also, probably the biggest weakness on that deck is the fact that you really just finish your cards to buy, and this card will probably obviously solve this problem by giving you more cards to play. And also it has a cool interaction, which is a semi-infinite scenario. While you have a bunch of overseers into play, then probably some rights, for example, Rite of Brood are the best, and then you have 4 of those, then it's almost uninfinite, because you are pretty much assured to restock every time you play an ally, by the way, because if you have 4 of them and they are like switched by 1, so you have actually 1 at 0, 1 at 2, 1 at 2 and 1 at 3, then every time you play an ally you will restock a card. But even if they are not in subsequent numbers, every 4 cards you play you are assured to have 4 more allies to play, and so the infinite still stands. And the infinite is that you are pretty much assured to draw sometimes gold punners, or the one that when you play it you gain 1 more resource, and it also returns to the end. I can't remember the name. The Scavengers, that's the name. And so you're pretty much assured to restock 1 of them, and with a bunch of overseers, the gold punners actually give you more gold than the gold you are spending on it, and the same goes for the Scavenger. And also with the Rites of Brood, you are pretty much assured to get even more resources out of them, so you can always buy a slave from the bank, and that's a semi-infinite, like I said. So definitely a pretty interesting card, balanced, and also has a cool infinite scenario, so definitely pretty interesting. And then for the first place, we actually have for the first time 3 cards tied in for the first place and at the max rating possible. So definitely congrats to those users. The first of which is Cardiac Arrest from Rat Elemental. It's a Glacial card from Endazu, obviously. It costs 4 gold and it reads: discard target ally, lose health points equal to its life, and gain life instead if you control it. It also has a flavor text, which reads, playing with Ars can have a much darker side than people think. So really a really good flavor text. And as I said, it is a max rating card, so 5 points out of 5 in design and 5 points out of 5 in balance, for a final rating of 15 out of 15. And the reason why for those choices is because really by design this card fits really well thematically with love, and the flavor text really highlights this fact, because you are playing with ours but in a much darker side than you think. You're actually causing a cardiac arrest to the earth of your victim. So it is like playing with ours. It is a really cool love theme thematically, as I said. But as the flavor text says, it is a darker side with playing with ours. So really cool, really on point in theme. Also, the card itself is really well designed in the sense that it actually is an art removal, which is balanced out by the fact that you are losing health points if you use it on your opponent's stuff. Instead, you gain life if you use it on something you own, like almost if you gave it life and then you are taking it back. So really, another time, really thematically correct with Goetia and Azu in general. And also the balance is also fine, because really at 4 gold you are getting an art removal with a bit of a cost. The more the ally you are removing is strong, so actually if it has more health, the more you have to pay for it. So also in that sense it is balanced. And then it also has the cool interaction where you could use it possibly on your own allies, for example if you need health, but most importantly, and probably most of the times, if you want to use it on the underworld barge. And it is true that right now the underworld barge really took a really huge nerf, but before this card was really strong in combo with the underworld barge. And so that's also a combo enabler and stuff. Probably the only thing I have to say on the balance is probably letting it be 3 gold instead of 4, but really this is just a really small change that would also need testing to actually say if this card is a 3 gold cost or a 4 gold cost, but other than that really it's just balanced out and really well designed. And then for the first place we have Jealousy from Paladin, and it's a Metris card from the Espionage tab. It costs 2 gold, and it reads: if enemy has more allies than you, attack 2 times, and if enemy has more resources than you, steal 2 of them, random resources. Then destroy after use, like all Metris card. It also has a flavor text, which reads: you can only be jealous of someone who has something you think you ought to have yourself. So definitely describe really well the jealousy aspect of it. Actually, the jealousy sentiment in the first place. So as I said, it is a 5 out of 5 points in design and 5 out of 5 points in balance, for a final rating of 15 out of 15. And the reason why for those choices is because, yet again, another time, it really fits well with the theme of love. Actually, the jealousy, not love itself, but jealousy is almost always caused by love for something or someone. So, as the card suggests, if, for example, your opponent has more allies, so, for example, more friends, it could be seen like that, then you're jealous of those things. And so your friends, you want to have friends, so love for people. Instead, if your opponent has more things than you, so actually resources, then you want those things for you. And so another time is love for things, for stuff. And so really, it really gives the idea of jealousy, and it also really fits thematically with love, which was the theme of this week. So in design, it's really well done. And also it is well done in balance, because in the best case scenario, so if your opponent has more allies than you and your opponent has more resources than you, then this card is a robbery and a weaker waylay. And the waylay is 2 gold for 3 attacks, so probably 2 attacks is worth a gold, and probably more than that. And a robbery is again another time 1 gold. So this card comes into only 1 card. So you are spending the same gold and probably even a bit less than that, but only 1 card to get both the effects. So really, this card may seem too strong, because it does things better than card already existing at a lower cost and also in less cards used to do the effect. But it is not, because it can only be used if you are behind, either on allies count or on resource count. And probably most of the times I could really see this card work in a Theodox burn, because probably Tedoxborn doesn't run allies, so it is a way to kill some of his stuff, like you will do with Waylay, or probably more appropriately with Mayhem. This card could only work for ally removal if your opponent has a really low amount of allies. So for example, if you just want to do the Mayhem, but your opponent has one ally, you could use first the Jealousy and then the Mayhem to do more damage to it, like Waylay is currently used in that scenario. But also you are probably almost all the times at a lower resource amount than your opponent, and so you're actually stealing 2 every time. And for the Terox burn in particular, this second effect is not that great, because obviously you want to burn out your opponent, but it's also a really a good effect to get if you get it plus the burn effect. So really also well balanced and really cool design. And then, for the last first placed card, we have Gilded Art from DFY Pestilence. It is an inscription from Endazu. It costs 3 golds and it reads, target ally can't be killed, instead its controller loses 1 gold and 1 magic. It also has a flavor text, which reads, my Gilded Art will keep you safe, try to not break this art of mine. And another one, because he couldn't decide on both of them, so he actually wrote all of them, both of them. And the second one is, I gild your heart to guard it breaking for nothing. Not even magic can mend a broken heart. So definitely those flavor texts are really evocative and really well written. So really, the flavor text, as I said, doesn't improve or actually hinder the design or balance the points, but really they are just good to read if they are well done, like those ones. So really, congratulations to his writing skills. But returning to the actual card, I gave this card 5 points out of 5 in design and 5 points out of 5 in balance for a final rating of 15 out of 15. And the reason why for those choices is because really for the design aspect, it's really cool that you gild a heart and actually gave it another life, like the card does, because it can't be killed, but then the gilded heart is discarded, so it's not like you are letting that ally be immortal, but you are just giving 1 more life for another time. And so it's really cool for design. And in balance, I also think it's balanced out. Probably it is a bit more on the weak side. It may be balanced by reducing the cost every time. For example, only losing 1 magic and not the 1 gold also. Or probably decreasing the initial gold cost you have to pay for it. But I can see this card used in some really great scenarios. Like for example, in a Zalazam deck. For example, you want to probably you go first turn with a Zamzigar, which is really famous, the first turn Zamzigar, and you offer the first turn Zamzigar, you pump it out to 4 charges, and then you also grab a Peacock to actually heal up your Zamzigar if it gets killed. Then your opponent probably can't remove it on the first turn, so then on the second turn you go for the Gilded Art and play it on the Zamzigar, and possibly also pump up your Twilight Peacock with whatever. For example, if you manage to give your Twilight Peacock 3 more charges and actually put it at 5 charges, then you have a Zamzigar with another life and a Peacock. So your opponent has to decide to kill the Zamzigar, but then the Zamzigar will not attack for a turn because it is dead at the start of your turn, but your Peacock will heal him because the Zamzigar actually stayed on the board because you actually gilded arted it. Or he first has to kill the Twilight Peacock, so that then you can kill the Zamzigar, but it will stay on play, obviously, but then you are just continuing taking damage. So really, I could see this card to be strong in those scenarios, but probably weak in any other scenarios. Like for example, if you want to play it on a Gilded Warrior, then you are spending 3 gold for the Gilded Warrior and 3 gold for the Gilded Art, and also all the times whenever you get the Gilded Art effect, you are losing 1 gold and 1 magic, so actually you are spending 7 gold and 1 magic to get the effect, which is more than a Yarakan in the first place. So you could go, if you wanted to have an unkillable ally, you could go for a Yarakan, which is, by the way, not killable all the times. So really it is not that strong in those scenarios, but it could be used in cards which really would benefit from not being killable. Like for example, as I said, at Zanzibar, or probably also at Edge Guardian, there are cards which are really strong if they can't be killed. But probably still it is a bit too weak on the cost, but that could also be balanced out, but it would need testing, obviously. So really well done. So, that's it for this video. Hope you liked it and find it useful. Be sure to leave down below a comment to let me know what you want to see in the next videos, and as always, see ya!